Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. I'm the founder and host of Let's Talk Supply Chain, and I'm so happy to be working again with the team at Blackberry Radar. Now, I've interviewed them on Let's Talk Supply Chain a couple of times, episode 322 and 358, if you want to go and check them out after the session. And this is the third webinar we've collaborated on together this year. So I hope you've been enjoying all the great content. Now, today we are talking about coordinated asset management in transportation and logistics. Now, managing a range of assets in a fragmented industry is a highly complex task. Strategic planning, utilization, maintenance, optimization, there are so many fundamental areas that are crucial for the success of any logistics or transportation organization. But the dynamic and often volatile nature of the industry adds layer upon layer of complexity, variable demand, regulatory changes, customer expectations. Without effect management, this long list of challenges can lead to inefficiencies, increased costs, and decreased service quality. And many companies are struggling to find a solution. Well, coordinated asset management may well be the answer. And Givens Transportation is here to tell us how they pulled industry-leading technology partners together to build a state-of-the-art supply chain management solution that tackled these challenges and set them up for scalable success. They're going to talk to us about the challenges they were facing and the big business impacts. We're going to be exploring how to leverage technology partnerships to drive measurable outcomes and operational improvements. And we're going to shine a light on why collaborative coordinated asset management solution is so very powerful in solving complex logistical challenge. Now, this is going to be fascinating, and we'd love to hear from all of you. So if you have any questions, make sure to put them in the Q&A box, and we are going to get to those near the end of our discussion today. But before we get started, we each need to understand who each one of you are. So let's get into introductions. Tell us who you are and what you do. Chad, we're going to start with you.
All right, good afternoon. Thanks for having me, Sarah. My name is Gregg. I'm the Vice President of Givens Transportation. So I've got overall operational responsibility for the transportation organization. So while my career is in logistics and transportation, my hobbies and my education are in the information space. So I focus a lot of my time on finding some unique solutions to challenges that come up day to day in the operations. Transportation is co-located on the Givens Incorporated campus. You're seeing a picture here of the distributed warehouses in the region here. And we provide some services to Givens Incorporated that we'll talk a little bit further down the road here. But really excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Excited to have you here as well. Now we're going to hear from Chris. Chris, welcome.
Thank you, Sarah. And my name's Chris Machut. I'm the founder and CEO of SiteTracks.io. I've been a serial entrepreneur for the last 2 decades, and logistics tech is where we are today. At SiteTracks, we're really revolutionizing the way logistics teams track and manage their assets. We've developed an AI-powered real-time asset tracking solution that provides unparalleled visibility over intermodal containers, trailers, trucks across the supply chain, and really excited about sharing our story with Givens here today. What really makes us unique is our ability to adapt seamlessly to any operation, whether it's at a port or warehouse in the drayage yard, without the need for costly infrastructure changes. Our tech works with the businesses. Ultimately, we're integrating critical asset data into existing systems. We help our partners eliminate inefficiencies, cost reduction, making things safer, and making decisions better. SiteTracks is all about empowering logistics teams. I'm really excited about sharing our data and our journey with Givens here today and our partners Blackberry and SPLICE. Our data is not only accurate, but it's actionable so that Givens and our businesses and partners can deliver on what really matters, which is exceptional results and staying ahead of the competition.
Love to hear that. And thanks for joining us today, Chris. Now we're going to hear from Kevin.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here as well. And many thanks to Blackberry for putting on the webinar. I'm Kevin Speers. I'm the CEO of SPLICE. And SPLICE is an integration platform that's designed for supply chain management and logistics. So in our very diverse industry, there's lots of different data that's out there. And what SPLICE does is we bring it together. So we drive for interoperability between systems where it doesn't exist. We get everybody speaking the same language. And one of our products where we apply that is called YardSpot. And YardSpot is an integration-centric approach to yard and asset management. And it's the tool that Chad and Gibbons uses to keep track of assets in their yard. And it combines, as we'll talk about, the data that Chris generates at SiteTracks and Blackberry generates, and we bring that together into a common operating picture.
Love to hear that. You're all speaking my language, talking about collaboration. I mean, that's kind of the theme across this whole conversation today. So excited to have you here. Last but absolutely not least is Shannon. Shannon, welcome to the webinar today.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Chad, Chris, and Kevin for joining today. Sarah, you coined it. Collaboration is the future of business. So I'm really excited for us to be kind of co-working together on this webinar. For those that may not be familiar, Blackberry, we are that Blackberry. So we are producing very rugged, reliable, and secure devices for the transportation industry. I think what's going to come through today is the combined benefit of all of the partnerships that Chad and Gibbons are leveraging are really allowing them to get ultimate visibility to not only where their assets are, but how are their assets operating. And the introduction slide there from Blackberry really allows you to see beyond just location to the critical events that further help you optimize your organization. So we're very excited to help bring this conversation together today, and we look forward to lots of questions.
Yeah, and hopefully we will have a lot of questions. Remember to put those in the Q&A box. Now, let's start with some background to the discussion today. So Chad, I'm going to start with you. What is coordinated asset management? Maybe tell us a little bit about the challenge you were having.
Sure, that's a pretty big question. So there are many different roles. Let me restate. So Kevin and Chris and Shannon are talking about a lot of different data. Within the logistics world, there's a lot of different players in the import and export space specifically. So manufacturers, BCOs, shippers, forwarders, carriers, ports, freight brokers. I mean, you can name the list and it'll go on forever. And a coordinated asset management approach is something that can provide the fewest number of solutions that adds value to as many of these individual roles as possible. And that significantly increases efficiencies across the board. And that's both improving service levels and keeping costs in line. So there's no one solution or one fit that's going to fix everything. It takes coming together as a community and tackling these big problems together in a coordinated approach.
Absolutely. And we've been talking a lot about collaboration. It's one of the reasons why we're all here today. And so Shannon, I want to start with you first. Why is collaboration of technology so important in logistics and transportation?
Yeah, great question. Well, I think, Gibbons' operation kind of tells a good part of that story, which means that there are a lot of different types of assets and a lot of partners that need to work together as connectedly as possible to not only deliver the goods, but to share that information with each other. We have companies that do really great work tracking powered assets. But the non-powered asset world, which is an area that we focus in, often hasn't had as much technology. And so I think what we're going to talk about today in terms of collaboration is really bringing, SiteTracks together with Blackberry to kind of bring this view of assets. And I'm going to pick on containers for a second. Containers are still, the last report that I saw, probably, in the single digits to high teens at best of cases tracked with some form of technology. So the reality is that, even though there are upwards of 60 million containers that are roaming the world, very few of them have technology on them. And so being able to kind of partner with SiteTracks to help Gibbons be able to digitally capture information relative to their containers in their yard and then pair that with assets that move like chassis and or trailers and so on, really means that you are taking a leap forward to digitize your operation, while going through this, I'm going to call it journey that the industry's on to adopting technology. So it's kind of bringing the physical device, but digital information together in a way, and Kevin's helping pull it all together. That's just a really great example of making the best of the technology we have today and doing more with it.
Well, and Kevin, would you agree with that on the importance of why collaboration of technology is so important right now? What would you add to that?
Yeah, it's, bringing the data together so that you can collaborate effectively is really a missing link in so many of the data sources that are out there. There's, we have a lot of silos in our organizations and in the way the data works. So collaboration is, if you think about the team members who can make use of better information, if that's, of course, folks in the yard, shuttle truck drivers, warehouse operations, particularly when you're looking at transloading operations, when you're looking at the small and medium-sized yards where throughput and efficiency is the productivity is so critical. So you can think about the warehouse, but then also folks in accounting, people trying to optimize utilization, not only for cost, but also for revenue as well. If you're leasing chassis, or you're taking care of getting that cargo to the folks who need it. So there's a lot of different layers to collaboration. And I think that's one of the things that makes this case study and the discussion today so fascinating, is that we hit many different levels of it.
Yeah, and you hit it on a good point. There's the communication, right? We're siloed internally, and we need to be able to communicate and give the right information to the right people at the right time. So let's keep this high level for now, because we're going to do a bit of a deeper dive into this during the session. But can each of you just give us a brief overview of the collaboration between Blackberry, SiteTracks, and SPLICE, how partnerships like this is sort of driving the effective coordinated asset management? So Chris, I'm going to start with you. Talk to us about your role in this particular partnership.
Our background as an organization has been in computer vision, so identifying objects in the real world. And when Gibbons first originally reached out to us with this challenge, everyone remembers the pandemic and what happened with containers. The president of the company was flat out just went, "Chris, see all those containers over there? We oftentimes don't know where they are." And I was like, "Well, what's the problem? What's the challenge?" They said, "Well, when we can't find it, my vice president, my director, my dispatcher, we're literally out in the yards not doing our jobs, trying to find where one load might be." And that got our minds going. And this is where SiteTracks was really born out of, was that desire to, it's not necessarily practical to put a GPS puck on everything or an RFID on everything, especially when they're marine intermodal containers that go all around the world. He simply asked us, "Hey, Chris, could you take something as simple as a cell phone and scan this inventory? Can my staff, instead of going around, hand write down everything? Can they just scan everything? And can you tell me where it is?" And we went, yeah, that's the birth of the concept around SiteTracks and what we delivered to Gibbons today. The key thing that was missing in all that is the real-time then visibility of it. And that's where the Blackberry comes in. And then where does that data then go? And how does it become actionable? And that's where the power of SPLICE and YardSpot gets introduced.
Yeah, so Shannon, talk to us about the role that Blackberry plays in this partnership as well.
Yeah, no, great question. So Gibbons, as Chad introduced, has a number of different types of assets. And so being able to track the chassis is an important part of what we do, capturing the container mounted event that's taking place in the yard and extending that visibility once that chassis leaves the yard is one of the specific benefits that we're providing. In addition to that, on the trailers, Gibbons is utilizing our gateway device as well as our cargo sensor. So we're able to help provide visibility to the changes in cargo status. As a trailer is loaded and unloaded, that information can be shared operationally with the team and also shared with the customer. So we're able to go beyond location and share those, geofence entry, exits, door open, door closed, and cargo events that further allow Givens to understand how their assets are being used. It's not just about where they are, but how are they being used.
Yeah, exactly. And then last but not least, Kevin, I think you bring it all together. So share with us what that means.
Yeah, we do. We do bring it all together. So we use this integration platform to combine the data that's being created by SiteTracks and by Blackberry, so that there is a single place where the Givens team can come and see exactly what's going on in real time. And then we use that data to help them determine where things need to move and what needs to happen next. So about 2,500 shuttle truck moves are planned each month using YardSpot. So they know the location of the asset, and they need it to move to a certain door by a certain period of time, and that's part of the capability within YardSpot to make it actionable. Because the layout of Givens is really dynamic. I think Chad's slide showed that. They're on about a 2-mile stretch of highway, but they have 8 different yards that are there. So each of them is kind of autonomous in how they're working, but YardSpot brings that together to be able to coordinate on the fly with the drivers and yard operations to get the cargo where it needs to be in order to get it unloaded and moved, and then get those empties returned back to the terminal.
Awesome. Well, thank you to each one of you for giving us that overview. We're going to get to Chad and Givens' story in just a second. One, I see your question. We will get to that just a little bit later on in the show. So Chad, this webinar is really about Givens' journey. Can you talk to us a little bit more about the organization? Like, give us an overview of Givens Transportation, who you are, what you do, how you help your customers.
Sure. So Givens Transportation is solely an asset motor carrier based in Chesapeake, Virginia. We've got additional terminals in Greensboro, North Carolina, Columbia, South Carolina, and Savannah, Georgia. So in addition to providing typical dry and reefer truckload service across the lower 48, Givens Transportation is offering container drayage services along the East Coast. But as it relates to today's conversation, we're also providing yard management services to our biggest customer in this space, Givens Incorporated. So as Kevin was saying, we operate 8 warehouses in Chesapeake, around 200 loading doors across all those warehouses. Each of those warehouses has its own drop yard, and transportation operates a separate auxiliary drop yard as well. So we've got a lot of different places for assets to end up. And anyone who's in the freight space knows that ocean containers can come in some pretty big fluxes of volume. And when that happens, we end up looking for different spaces to put different boxes, and that presents that unique challenge of where does everything end up?
Lots of moving parts, pardon the pun. All right. Can you talk to us about those challenges? What were you facing when you started to realize that you needed to find a solution? And what were some of the biggest external factors that were impacting you? I mean, obviously, you've got a lot of moving parts, which I just said, and you've got a lot of locations where things can end up. So talk to us about that.
Sure. So being in proximity of the Port of Virginia, the inbound freight that Givens warehouses are receiving is primarily containerized import cargo, plus some additional inbound domestic shipments. So the vast majority of that inbound freight is drop and hook as opposed to a scheduled appointment. So this leads to many occasions where those yards are full. And when yards are full, warehouse volumes are also generally higher, which necessitates really close timing of when the door moves. There's a lot of different language for yard jockeys, yard trucks, shuttle moves. So I'll probably use those interchangeably. But the importance of timing of those door deliveries is crucial to keeping warehouse labor management efficient. The warehouse operations managers can understand when to plan labor because they will end up moving labor between warehouses. So they need to understand where to put resources, when to put it, when are they going to need it. And as yard managers, if we fall behind on our duties there, that ends up having idle time for labor and then pushing into overtime potentially. So cost implications are high. And then we get into the customer factors. So if we've got containers that are out of the port for too long, we can begin incurring charges, and that just becomes a big headache. So getting things to doors so they can be stripped as quickly as possible and then loaded back out on transloads or stored safely. Those are all the things that really make this problem both unique and important one to solve. Without these kinds of solutions, we end up spending, I think it was Chris that was talking about, we spend a lot of labor resources having to go do it the old-fashioned way, riding around on golf carts and in cars trying to find something that's missing. And that is, it sounds like a small problem, one container, but it happens to always be that one really hot container that a customer needs today that just brings everything to a halt. On the internal side, the warehouses, they operate generally independently of one another. They've got different needs because they're servicing different customers. And that leads to a lot of variation in how the warehouse labor is managed and the timing of those receipts and the outbound loads. So as everyone's already been mentioning, that having all these containers, the biggest problem and the first and most important one is just where's the container? And then secondly, how do we efficiently coordinate the movement of the container once we found it to the appropriate door? And that getting into the yard space coordination was complicated and old-fashioned how we were handling it before.
Well, and talk to me about how those challenges in particular were impacting your business. You mentioned, obviously, from a warehouse standpoint, how that was impacting labor. But what about expanding that into the overall business?
Resource expenditure is probably the biggest one. Customer service levels is one of the more public ones. So when we end up with containers that are out of the port, we end up with ship line detention invoices, and those are charges that on some occasions end up directly to the customer. So it's an indication that we may have had a failure on our part. So one, save face and making sure we're servicing customers as they expect to be serviced. It's just crucial that not just the truckload drayage side, in transportation space, we think a lot about a driver pulling a tractor trailer down the road. That is a big piece of the business, but shuffling containers around is a lot more complicated than I personally expected when I came into this space.
No kidding. Kind of one big Jenga puzzle or Tetris, right?
Yep. Very heavy Jenga.
Well, so like many across the industry, you were facing a lot of tough challenges. And I know from a lot of conversations that I have, organizations are often overwhelmed by challenges, how to prioritize, how to start for solving them. Where do I start? That's always a big question in a lot of people's minds. So what were the first steps in identifying challenges, the impacts they were having, and thinking about how you could tackle them? Chris, I'm going to send this one over to you.
So the impact on more specifically these operations that are these facilities that have combination of like drayage and warehousing cross, like Chad had referenced, it's a pretty big, Chad, would the right word be nightmare at times when things get misplaced?
Saying that lightly. Yep.
And at the end of the day, it all starts with good data. We feel extremely confident in that. You put good things in, you get good things out, usually, as long as it's actionable. And our business model is to pretty much create that good data and make it simple and easy. At Givens Operations, they're primarily focused on, when using site tracks, of where are their assets actually located. So yard inventory is their primary use cases. But other use cases also apply of things like in-gates and out-gates, knowing when it comes in and out of their facility, looking, I love this image of their facility. They have about, 18 different entrances, Chad? So there isn't an official in-gate or out-gate across all of their warehouses.
Wow.
And finally, we also have a lot of interesting data points with proof of pickup and proof of drop-off. Those three macro kind of elements, those data points, those critical events, if you will, help a lot of our customers in their operations get fed good data into systems then ultimately like SPLICE and YardSpot to make that data actionable.
Well, and that brings me to my next question, because you really outlined the first steps, but then how do you establish that partnership to bring in, Blackberry and SPLICE to SiteTracks to create this solution? Kevin, do you want to talk to us about that?
Yeah, I think one of the things that happens when you start bringing data sets like that BlackBerry and SiteTrax can provide, and you put it into a platform like YardSpot, you really get that multiplier effect, where if the data standalone is excellent, but when you start layering it and then applying some simple frameworks to them, frameworks like moving them, I mentioned already moving the shuttle trucks, but there's things where we're keeping track of how long have we seen that asset? How long has it been there? Where has it been over its life within Given's possession? So that helps them manage the return of those assets back to the terminal, so you're avoiding detention. It helps them understand driver productivity. And Chad already mentioned the very costly one, which is labor management inside the warehouse to be able to time the movement of those things. But those things come about once we have all this good data that's stacked on top of each other. So it really is a 1 + 1 = 6 sort of scenario.
I like that you said the multiplier effect. I mean, that's kind of what everybody wants when we're thinking about partnerships. Now, another question that comes up for me a lot in the conversations is, how do we decide that, this partner or these partners were the best course of action? How do you choose these partners specifically and get started on that journey? Chad, can you answer those two questions for us?
Sure. So while off-the-shelf solutions existed to help manage container locations, others to help manage trailer locations, and another separate solution for coordination, they were all independent solutions and independent systems that were generally not designed to work together in this coordinated fashion. We needed something new that didn't come with a steep learning curve. And SiteTrax proposed, as Chris already talked to, an alternative solution to those gate cameras, which is a common solution. It just didn't fit our use case. So they had proposed the phone app or the mobile device app that the jockey drivers themselves can operate. Very simple. It's just a couple of buttons. There's no configuration necessary. So we worked for a long time testing it with a lot of test data and training data. We were very impressed with the accuracy. If you've ever seen a shipping container, they come in different shapes, different rust levels, different paint levels, stickers are scraped. So there are a lot of different variations on how accurate OCR technology can be. And I think, fortunately, we've got a lot of containers in and out, so they had a lot of training data to train the system. And the accuracy level was impressive to the point where I drove myself and hand counted and hand wrote every container while I was scanning. Every single one of those containers showed up, and it was frankly shocking.
Wow.
So that's what sold us on SiteTrax.
When you say tested, you really tested it out.
Yeah. So losing track of a container it turns into a big problem. We've mentioned it already before, but obviously there's cargo liability concerns we've got to be aware of. This is a space that it's been a manual process for decades because it is a crucial process to logistics management. So we didn't want to just find an easy solution that worked 95% of the time. We needed accuracy in the space. So then an additional thing I don't think we've talked about is SiteTrax isn't just saying container XYZ is at GPS coordinates ABCD 1, 2, 3. It's also presenting our operations folks with a picture of the container. So when we've got jockey drivers rolling around, they're looking for a box, they know they're looking for a white one or a blue one. So that makes things even quicker.
That helps.
Yeah, definitely. So when it comes to SPLICE, SPLICE is located in the area near us. We've had some great experiences working with SPLICE on previous projects before. We knew they had a knack for coming up with some unique solutions to our unique challenges. And once SiteTrax had reliable container location data flowing and images, SPLICE began work on developing YardSpot as the user interface, right? How do we make it easy for people to use? For not only the yard jockeys, but all the drayage drivers, our over-the-road drivers, and the warehouse personnel too. So we had containers kind of under control, and then we had a partnership with Blackberry. And Shannon already mentioned the unique piece here is unpowered. So if you're not familiar with the jockey space, there are a lot of movements that occur where there is no power being applied to the trailing equipment, which a lot of other tracking providers require you to have power. And we would then lose location, or it would become stale location data. So I was really interested in Blackberry's unique approach to the battery-powered steel devices, and then began to learn those other features. We have a pool of chassis. One of the problems that we honestly didn't even realize we had is the chassis in use or not? So the technology that BlackBerry afforded us is the ability to see if the chassis is in use, which we didn't think it was going to be valuable, but it has turned out to be quite valuable. So while I was initially attracted to BlackBerry's hardware and their API offering, I then quickly learned the value of the BlackBerry Radar dashboard, which is a very robust dashboard that allowed us to provide information to customers that we had not before, and frankly, we weren't even aware that that was possible. So we found some really strong partners that were willing to work together. And really, if you're willing to work together and come up with some unique solutions, you're going to likely be a good fit together.
Well, and I think that that's a really key point to make here, is that each one of them was open-minded to partnerships and working together and making sure that the data is flowing in a way that works for you as a customer. So I want to ask Shannon, Kevin, and Chris then, what's your perspective on why all of that coordinated asset management is so crucial? We heard from Chad. Now I want to hear from each one of you. So Shannon, we'll start with you first.
Yeah, so thank you, Chad, because I think that you did a brilliant job of kind of summarizing all of the work that we've done together. But really, kudos goes to you and the Givens team, because you kind of brought us as technology providers together, right? I want to be clear to the audience that Chris and Kevin and I we're kind of working behind the scenes and then pitching our solution. I think it's come from Givens having different operational challenges. And one of the things that I heard said was there's a lot of off the shelf solutions that might claim to do a lot of things broadly. But the reality is that if you're staying in a lane and picking an area of expertise and focus and doing it really well, companies like Givens want the best of the best. They want the best solution, which is, not always a one-size-fits-all solution. So it kind of forces us as technology providers to work together. And I know Chris and I have had conversations where we're like, do we complement one another? Do we compete against one another? Like, what does that look like? And to be honest with you, we've worked through together with other customers beyond Givens. The reality is that we bring features to life of both of our solutions that ultimately deliver a better solution to the end customer. And that's what's the most important, because if we do more together for our end customer, each of our solutions is going to be more sticky. We're going to get pushed to develop features that maybe we didn't have. And I think that collaboration it's a rising tide that lifts all boats, and it's ultimately Givens is benefiting. But honestly, Givens pushed us to come together and also show how we could all work together.
Awesome. And that's good to note and good to hear as well as to where that driver came from. Kevin, why do you think that all of this is so crucial?
Well, I think it's a common customer-centric mindset that we're bringing to the problem. And that customer-centric mindset starts with Givens, and they're driving for a solution that's going to serve their customers, and then coming back to us as technology providers to come up with ideas on how to make that work. So I think it begins with how you're fundamentally approaching the problem. And then you have technology providers or data providers like BlackBerry and SiteTracks that they're forward-leaning in providing APIs and data sets that are malleable to different situations, right? You don't find that everywhere. And tools like YardSpot are designed to bring in a lot of different types of data and be able to provide actionable data sets from that. And without a mindset where you're customer centric and you're open to sharing that data, you're just not going to get very far. So I think, for the audience out there, when you're thinking about your technology providers, looking for companies that are data sharing focused, that's really important to be able to tailor a solution that's going to meet your need.
Yeah. Anything to add to that, Chris?
I would say that the days of data siloing is a zero-sum game at the end of the day. Our entire model from day one It was actually when we were originally talking with Givens, Chris, why don't you create a YMS interface? No, I'm sorry, a TMS no, a WM. No, have you ever heard of a terminal operating system too? And we're just like, what are you talking about? What does Givens need? They need data. They need good data. And partners like SPLICE make that then data actionable. Blackberry providing that real-time visibility, SiteTracks providing that critical event inventory of where things are located. At the end of the day, partners are our fuel as a business. We take that model of where does the customer need the data to go? Where does the customer need to solve a problem to reduce costs, generate more revenue, make customers happy, and to be transparent with all of their operations. From the truckers, it was actually Givens that taught me that a 3PL's customer is that trucker. And there is nothing worse for a trucker to have an hour to 2 hour turn time in your facility just trying to find the load. You really want to have some bad things happen, don't make them mad. And you reduce trucker turn time, everybody wins out at the end of the day.
Yeah, everybody's happy. Can I just say that it's so good to hear about collaboration out in the wild? Like, I talk about this all the time. The future of business is collaboration, and it's just nice to see it and hear about the partnership and show that, like, the client was the driver in this, but you've all really come together and embraced your role in what the results have been for Givens. And so I want to get into that with Chad. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of those improvements that you've seen in your asset management at Givens?
Sure. So we've talked about locations of things and coordinating movements. I haven't really touched too much on the improvements from the warehouse operations side. So warehouse, previous to this collaborative tool, warehouses would use a high-tech solution and send an email to request container ABC to a door. Once that request is made, it was in the nether until a container or a trailer showed up at the door they requested. So they lost all visibility on when it was going to happen. So just the YardSpot tool, giving them access to this gives them a window of where they are in line. They know which driver has got the container or which one's going to be assigned. They have opportunities to make corrections or changes before it happens if they need to cancel it. So that saves us time. And it allows them to plan better, so they have a better idea of what sequence they are on the day. We do know that yard moves are being completed in a much shorter time period. It's really hard to show that value quantitatively since we didn't have any of that data before these solutions were in place. So I'm really excited to be able to analyze what we've been doing over the last year or so. I will say the frequency of these all-hands efforts that Chris was talking about to go locate a container, those have dropped to 0. I have not gone searching for a container in at least 12 months. So that's been really helpful.
Have you had to use a pen and paper?
Anyone who works around me will know that if they hand me a piece of paper, I'm either going to scan it and throw it away or ask them to email it to me because this space moves too fast for paper. I mean, it's been great.
I love that. Do you have any other qualitative? I know you said qualitative, and that you're going to see a lot more of that. Some of those qualitative benefits, just really quickly, that you can share with us, or even any stats that you might have.
I mean, so the most satisfying subjective measure was a flood of positive feedback from those warehouse operations folks.
Yes.
In this space, when you're talking with operations, you generally hear gripes and complaints. You don't often get unsolicited positive feedback. So we know something's working. Frustrations generally come from inefficiencies. So where those frustrations go away, we're just improving efficiency across the board.
I love that.
So that's going to be great. A tag-along benefit is our ability now, like I was talking about, to measure that efficiency. So we can review the number of touches per asset per week. Obviously, the more times you touch something, the less efficient it is. So we can make sure that warehouse are requesting the right things. We're not having to move things more than once or twice. And so we can then find where those problems exist, coach and talk through what the process should be. That's been a great help. So while YardSpot is ingesting this location data for the containers from SiteTracks at a point in time, we haven't really mentioned that a yard move is executed, right? That location data would become stale, but yard spot is keeping track, and now it updates that location based on the move that was executed. And in this space, if you think about it, if a warehouse requests to a door, I know exactly what door that box is located at. But if now the warehouse just says, it's empty, get it off my door, well, now the shuttle driver has an opportunity to pull the container and basically place it wherever they want to put it, which led to a different challenge. It wasn't so much the drayage drivers that were leaving them in places. Now the shuttle drivers had to find space for the empty. Well, this system allows them the opportunity to say the empty is, and just tap a button, it's here. So they're the ones updating those locations throughout the day. So when our dray driver goes to grab that empty to return it to the port, they can also look at yard spot, type in that container ID or the trailer and say, oh, it's over here, grab and go. A lot of those drivers are independent contract drivers.
Yeah.
So they are focused on efficiency, right? Safe and efficient operations. And this just allows them, affords them more opportunities to not have to rush, because rushing is dangerous in this game. So we want to remove that as much as possible.
Well, and I appreciate you for sharing the unsolicited feedback, because I just read about digital transformations. 80% of the success is actually the change management, and only 20% is the technology. And so that is a really big deal and a very big indicator of success when you do have that unsolicited feedback and you know that the change management piece was really, something that everybody clung to and helped make that digital transformation that success. So Charlie and Corey, I see your questions. We are going to get to those in just a minute. If you have any questions out there in the audience, make sure to get them in the Q&A box, because we definitely want to get to those. I've got some final questions about the collaboration. Because Chad is not the only one seeing the benefits from this collaboration. I think it's important that we talk about this aspect as well. So Chris, I'm going to start with you. What benefits have you seen at SiteTrax through this partnership?
Primarily is the value that the data that we generate, the geolocation of assets captured from pretty much any camera can provide to different types of customers in different ways. Ultimately, as I mentioned, the acronym sauces I like to refer to of these different yard management systems or transportation management systems and all these ERP dashboards, SPLICE and Blackberry and SiteTrax, all providing a different, unique value proposition in the data that they're interacting with and acting upon, makes our data look better. If we just provided Chad with a spreadsheet of GPS coordinates, timestamps, asset IDs, and pictures, he'd probably throw us out the door. Because they're like, well, what am I going to do with that, Chris?
That's where we started in testing, and I agree that would have been frustrating.
Oh my goodness.
Everything's coming out now, everybody.
Logistics spreadsheets only go so far. So having that actionable interface that YardSpot provides, along with the data from Blackberry, all tying that all together to make those systems actionable. Now you can't always just run from that pen and pencil like Chad was referring to. Spreadsheets do have a place. When it comes to that big data, you really have to boil it down with our partners. Our partners are everything for our business, and we stand behind that.
I love that. Thanks for sharing that. Now, Kevin, what have the positive been for SPLICE in this collaboration?
Well, I think it echoes some of the things that Chris was saying. And, SPLICE connects to over 120 different things, right? And so we have a lot of different connections out there of all shapes and sizes, APIs, EDIs, the whole alphabet soup of connectivity. But when you're able to connect it and actually drive it to such a meaningful purpose with the people that you're collaborating with, it just adds that, really just adds a lot more satisfaction to the result. And it really demonstrates the power of an integration-centric approach to yard and asset management that without the partnership, you're just not going to get there.
Right. So true. What about you, Shannon? What are some of the positive outcomes that you've seen from the partnership?
Well, a couple of things come to mind is, with Givens, I think we always start with, I'm going to call it the basics, which is, you need quality, accurate, reliable location information. But one of the big things that I think pushes us, and this has been something we need to continue to evolve with Chris at SiteTracks. Before Givens, we were talking to some of their leadership team a couple of weeks ago, is okay, we can now take the benefits and the investment of the technology even further. So what do I mean by that? We've talked about how the marine container industry is lagging, and it will for a long time because of the investment that would be needed to equip all of these containers with tracking. But we have good, accurate digital data coming from SiteTracks, and we've got the equipment, the chassis, and in this case, that is equipped with Blackberry radar. And Chad, I'm going to use your words. You didn't realize the power and the benefit of knowing whether that was loaded or not, right? So you can know where your piece of equipment is, but can I use it or not? Well, now we can use the chassis as a proxy for the container and marry digitally those two pieces of information together. So how do we start doing more with what we have? And this, might be, an extension that others that are listening could benefit and be thinking about too, which is you don't always need a physical piece of hardware on all of your pieces of equipment, right? What are you digitizing and what are you integrating data into? And then how do you use that information to ultimately better serve your customer, your employees, the drivers? So I think our benefit is that we're seeing positive feedback through Givens. We're having conversations with, I'll say, Chris at SiteTracks about how do we now extend the value of the technology even further and start doing what I call digital container tracking, which, is, I don't know, pretty cool stuff.
Well, that's such a positive that you can start having these conversations and really drive forward some innovation in the technology that maybe you didn't even think about, right? In places that you can go not only for your own organizations, but just for the customers as well. All right. So now we are going to get to your questions. So Juan asked the first question. What are the challenges for mobile assets that wireless at the last 100 meters is not addressing? I believe this is for Shannon.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the question. So I'm going to say if the perception is that the technology is less accurate at those shorter distances, I would say it's actually that's not the case. We say 3 meters. So everybody's going to laugh because I'm Canadian and you're going to go meters. But about 15 feet. So a head turn, left or right is going to give you a high degree of accuracy. And, BlackBerry's got 30, 40 years in the telecommunications space. So we're tinkering always with even fine tuning that accuracy even further. So I would say it's improving. It has improved. Our experience is it is definitely a lot more accurate than 100 meters. So it's something to, I think, just continue to look to the leaders in the industry to see what they're doing, because it can be better than that.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And thank you for the question, Juan. All right. Corey asks, can you track containers while they are on board a ship? I think, is that also for you, Shannon?
It could be. So it depends.
Yes, Shannon is taking
usually if they're buried many levels below, nobody's technology is going to be able to communicate the location. So again, you can associate the loading event with the container number and the vessel, and do some things to help pinpoint where a container is when it's on water. Our solution is cellular based, so it will tell you where it is when it's able to connect. And we're collecting data when we're not connected. So I would say in most cases, you're relying on the vessel location when the container is on board a boat, not the physical GPS on the container.
But the good news is at the same time, it's still collecting data no matter what, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that question, Corey. Now, Charlie, I like the statement that Chad has just made. Frustrations come from inefficiency. To what extent is this true all the time? Does competition sometimes drive this as well, among other reasons? All right, Chad, you're up.
Oh, sure. Well, of course, no blanket statement is true all the time, even though we want them to be. Of course, some frustrations can come from competition, but why does that competition sometimes win the business? Maybe their price was lower. Why was their price lower? Perhaps because of some inefficiencies you've got built into your network. We talk about how you select providers and what and identifying opportunities. What I would say is just spend time with your teams to understand their daily frustrations. Because of those frustrations in operations, they are commonly an indication of inefficiency, and they are generally opportunities for better coordination between different entities. So once you've got relationships with partners like Blackberry, SPLICE, and SiteTrax, discussing these frustrations with them gives them a glimpse into the business and then operations, and it gives them opportunities to educate you on what's possible and what may lead to solutions you never thought could exist because you're not familiar with the technology space, right? Our job is operations and moving trucks and containers around. It's not identifying integration opportunities in systems because that's not what we do. So it's just provides great opportunities to learn on both sides of the table. And those conversations then provides, just like we're talking, SPLICE, Blackberry, SiteTrax, learning what opportunities exist in the market to provide solutions.
Yeah, I think a big opportunity with process as well. You might have a process in place, but is it being followed? Why is it not being followed? Why are we going off script type thing? Kevin, you were nodding your head. Did you want to add anything there?
Not necessarily, but I will.
Okay.
One of the things in identifying these inefficiencies is from our perspective, you're able to see it when you start really beginning to bring more data elements together and being able to track them in different ways. So when with YardSpot and with Givens, being able to know how long things have been in the yard, when they first began, where they've moved, when did they move, who moved them, and giving that power back to the shuttle truck drivers too to be able to have control over that movement. That really helps. That really helps in driving out inefficiencies and raising up the problems that otherwise might get buried in the process.
Awesome. Thank you for adding that. Now we've got a couple of device questions. Juan,
I'm going to try to merge them all together, Sarah.
I was going to do that too. So Juan, David, and Diane, really, really great questions. And the questions are around battery life. They're also around mounting surface of the device as well, device as well. Shannon, can you answer those three for me?
Yeah, absolutely. So our device is very simple to install. It's 2 bolts. Hopefully Chad will nod his head and we get a lot of good feedback for just the ease of installation. So it's super simple. If you want to use a magnet for temporary mounts, that's an option as well. We spent a lot of time understanding the power management and what kind of power we wanted in our device. So it is battery powered and replaceable. So a lot of technology is throwaway technology these days, right? You have to throw away the whole device. You can actually replace our battery. It's going to last 5 years. I'm Canadian. I know what our winters are like. I tend to think that technology built in Canada needs to be robust, and BlackBerry's reputation for building robust devices is definitely standing behind these. Diane's question had a question about road salt and environment. We've got some pretty rigorous standards for low and high temperature. I think, our best example has been in the last 12 months, we've had pilots going on in Alaska where at some points it was -50 and customers up there are deploying. So if we've got customers that the device and the technology is standing the testament to Alaska and down through, parts of California and into Mexico, the proof is in the results that it's very rugged and reliable.
Yeah, -50, that is way too cold. All right. Well, I want to give each one of you, and thank you so much to everybody in the audience for all the great questions. Now, I want to give each one of you an opportunity to just let us know one thing. What's one piece of advice? What's one thing you would like people to take action from this conversation? And Chris, I'm going to start with you.
I'd say number one is start with good data. If your business is running into challenges, no matter if it is that asset inventory of wondering where your assets are located, being able to properly staff up, being able to communicate with the rest of your organization, really starts with good data. So whether it's a SiteTrack solution where you're using any camera to get your in gates and out gates or yard inventory, or you're putting a GPS puck device on your trailers, on your chassis, if you own your own chassis pool, or even your power units, they all have their value proposition, and ultimately make sure that information is actionable. If you have the data, you're creating the data, and it's actionable to the right people, the right players. So like platforms like SPLICE and YardSpot, what they do, just being able to tie that all together and make your team stronger and collaborate better.
Absolutely. Now, Brenda, I see your question, and I'm going to go to Shannon last, and she can answer your question while she's telling us the one piece of advice she wants everybody to walk away from. So, Kevin, what do you think? What's one thing you'd like everybody to walk away from this conversation with?
Well, I think one thing is that it's really possible to build the ecosystem you want and need in order to run your operation more effectively. I think what Givens has done demonstrates a lot of leadership and being able and foresight to think about what sort of combination is going to make their operation more efficient, and how do I build that ecosystem? What are the tools I need in order to make that, realize those benefits? And
awesome.
The power's out there with each of the folks in the audience to start thinking that through, and like, what are the pieces I need? And can I find the right people and the right technology to bring it about? Because there are the tools out there to make it happen.
Great. And what is your website in case anybody wants to get in touch with you, Kevin?
So they can find us at splice-it.com or yardspot.io.
Awesome. And Chris, what about you?
SiteTrax, that's SITETRAX.io is our website.
Awesome. Thank you. And then Chad, what's one thing that you'd like everybody to walk away from this with? And your website.
I just say the logistics space is full of tons of tools. It can be really easy to overwhelm the people who are going to end up using them. Dispatchers, coordinators, drivers, with all these bells and whistles, who may not be as tech savvy. So collaboration between these kinds of partners helps make good solutions. But things that not everyone wants to hear is sometimes say yes to those sales calls because you might get introduced to products and solutions that you aren't aware exist. And then just those quick 15-minute demo conversations, you may learn a lot more about technology and what is possible otherwise.
I love that. All right, Shannon, last but not least, we've got Brenda's question. Is the tracking real time, or is there just a lot of pings per day? So answer that. And then what's one thing you'd like everybody to walk away from this with?
So it's configurable. Being a battery operated solution, we're always balancing the number of updates with the battery life of the device. Like I said, we want it to last 5 years, but it's configurable. So customers can do, have updates that could be every 30 minutes or every 4 hours when the asset's in motion. So it really depends, but we're always collecting 5-minute breadcrumbs. The key is you'll always know where your where your asset is, whether it starts moving, stops moving, door open, door closed, all of those critical events always wake up our device and tell you where it is. So it's kind of unique. It requires a little bit of explanation, but happy to go into more detail if you want to reach out to me. Okay, so a piece of advice I would say is technology that organizations have purchased is usually with a vision for it to do one thing. And I think what Givens has highlighted through the collaboration is that there is a lot of extended value for technologies when you talk to your internal teams, when you understand more business problems. And so I think it's opening up your mind, asking the questions. A couple of examples are, we're venturing into things like maintenance. We've got a partner that's doing some great stuff in the tolling space. It's still all location data. It's location data when, it's stationary, but it's location data when it's moving. It's also the status. When a chassis moves into a rail ramp and a container gets loaded, that mounting event triggers a lot of other reports and costs for customers. And so we need to think beyond sometimes just the initial investment and what we thought we were going to get, and try to do more with what you've already got. So I think there's some really good examples that have come out of that through this conversation.
And where can everybody get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can find us at blackberry.com and under products, look for Blackberry Radar.
Awesome. Well, that brings us to the end of today's webinar. Thank you so much to all of you for listening, watching, all of your great comments and questions. I hope that you're going away feeling inspired and full of ideas for leveraging the power of technology and collaborative partnerships in your own business. Thank you so much to Chad, Shannon, Kevin, and Chris for joining me today, and for Blackberry Radar for coordinating this conversation. Thanks, everyone. See you again soon.